This was the twice-born one who had achieved conscious liberation during life. It was a birth into a new state. He would no longer hate. He would no longer desire. He would no longer sacrifice his principles or his possessions. He gained a certain detachment. How did he do it? Usually by becoming internally conscious in some way of something superior to the world. He could not escape while he believed in the world. But if by mystical experience, or by the strange disciplines of ancient esoteric sciences, he was able to experience inwardly a freedom from this world, and realize that in departing from it as an experience of consciousness, he was not leaving the greater for the lesser, or the known for the unknown, but rather that he was leaving something that he had outgrown, leaving darkness for light, leaving things that are not true for things that are, finding himself by sacrificing that which was not his real self. And having done so, he passed through the first gate of the mysteries, and was, for the beginning of his journey, a free soul, a soul searching light.
As time passed, I learned that the doctrine of rebirth is not a minority belief held only by a small group of eccentric individuals. Actually, it is one of the oldest and most universally distributed of all concepts. It is held in common by members of every race and all levels of culture, from the savage to the sage. Unfortunately, there is no way to prove spiritual truth to universal satisfaction. The doctrine of rebirth affirms that man is not identical with the body that he inhabits, that he has an eternal existence apart from body, and that in the course of personal growth he is born many times into the physical world. This series of embodiments makes possible the unfoldment of human consciousness and the orderly release and development of the infinite potential locked within man. At any given time, therefore, man is the sum of his own past achievements. He must meet and face the present requirements of growth, and he is the architect of his own future. Let us consider, then, our definition of rebirth in the light of those spiritual concepts which we have long held sacred. As a student of comparative religion, it seems to me that there are three essential doctrines which all enlightened religions hold in common. The first of these affirms that there is a supreme power or principle at the root of existence, and that this absolute being, this source of life, is responsible for the unfoldment of creation. The second essential doctrine of religion is the immortality of the human soul. This is the belief that man, transcending death, survives as a spiritual being, having an existence outside of and apart from the physical body in which he dwells during his material life. The superior and immortal part of man is more important than his body and should be given proper and due consideration. The actual perfection of man cannot be accomplished in one lifetime, but is possible only through a succession of embodiments or incarnations. The third basic article of faith is the ultimate victory of good over evil. God, or the divine principle, is sovereign wisdom and supreme good, and all the works of deity must therefore be wisely and eternally benevolent. But it is not always possible for man, with limited vision and understanding, to prove to his own internal satisfaction and contentment that the conditions through which he passes, with their uncertainties and tribulations, are in harmony with the will of an all-loving Creator. Troubled human beings are often impelled to ask, why are we here? Why should we suffer? And why should we have faith in anything? According to the teaching of rebirth, we are all here to grow and to learn. Self-improvement is possible to everyone. We are not here merely to succeed on the physical plane. We are here to succeed totally, which means that we must improve as persons, seeking richer internal values, deeper understanding, and a better orientation to the universal plan. The whole world is, then, like the traditional little red schoolhouse, and we are all students, willing or unwilling. Man is eternal, Learning is eternal, and the doctrine of rebirth provides the individual with conditions favorable for the final attainment of true wisdom and understanding. According to this doctrine, immediate success may not be likely, but ultimate failure is impossible. When we realize that we all come into this world to increase understanding through experience, problems of human relationships are simplified. Associations become important because they bring ever-increasing opportunities for understanding, tolerance, and mutual improvement. We grow and mature together through the gracious privilege of sharing. Thus we come to realize that we can be friendly beings, mutually helpful, gaining a rich and lasting enjoyment from pleasant association, and not attempting to dominate or possess each other. There is nothing in nature that denies man's right to be happy while he learns. If we really desire contentment and peace of mind, we must keep the laws governing our destinies.
This world is a place of testing. To many folks, the problem of anger is one of those difficult pressures of the personality to transmute or to control. And most of our troubles come under the conviction that we just cannot help being ourselves. Now, it's somewhat difficult to assume that ourselves, in the best sense of the term, have bad dispositions. They do not. The internal life of man is sustained by law and order. The real answer is that self-discipline is a tedious frustration of our feelings. We have to realize also that all dispositional inconsistencies are penalized. No matter how we approach the situation, it becomes obvious that nature wishes us to have good dispositions. And if we fail to meet nature's wish in this matter, nature has a way of enforcing its policy. The body itself is usually the primary victim of emotional intemperance. The body is damaged by any unreasonable, stressful, negative expression of emotion. This damage is inevitable, regardless of the motives which are impelling a wrong attitude. The fact that the emotion seems to be justified does not prevent the damage. Nature, therefore, is not to be bribed by some personal interpretation of feelings which are contrary to natural law. The law of nature is very simple and direct. Human beings must live together in peace or perish. Nature is sometimes subtle, but usually rather obvious. In other words, it surrounds the individual with increasing difficulties, arising from within the person himself, distributed through his environment, and reacting back upon himself. He stimulates good in others by using the good in himself. He stimulates discord in others when he stimulates the discord in himself. Nature has set this up as the last and final solution to all human problems. Namely, that the human being must grow or suffer.
I've often heard people give very eloquent discussions on principles and ideals, but many of them are still in trouble themselves. They are unable to escape from habit patterns and from the traditional backgrounds from which we have all come in one way or another. We feel that we can do anything we want to, but we do not curb, integrate, or educate the desire structure within ourselves. Everyone today is a little bit disturbed, some very much disturbed, by the complete collapse of our social system as we know it, the failure of our political system, the disabilities of our economic structure, and the continual danger to the personal life of the individual. So out of this comes anxiety, a continually increasing negative approach to circumstances.
There's hardly a day go by in which individuals do not come face to face with what to them is solid proof of the failure of their system of life. This is something that is bound to cause anxiety. But we have to also realize that these happenings are not accidents. Trying to work with this situation tells us very simply that the only cure for the problems that man causes is that man stop causing them. He must in some way change his own approach to existence. Now, headaches due to worry, anxiety, misunderstanding, misinterpretation, antagonisms of all kinds. These headaches, unfortunately, do not stay in the head. They come out into other areas of our lives. Now, if worry was what was intended, it would be unlikely that it would cause illness and be destructive to the human being. We must therefore assume that worry is not the answer. Worry is only a means of complicating the difficulty. So the problem of going around worrying, fretting, stewing, fearing everything that happens, mistrusting everyone, and in a state of perpetual criticism, this apparently is not the answer. The proof of that is that it is solving nothing and making us sick. The solution to the problem lies not only in our fears and anxieties, but in the solution of the causes of these fears and anxieties. It is useless to assume that the rest of humanity will agree with us on any subject. The only way we can stop worrying, stop fearing, stop hating, is to put a discipline upon ourselves. There is really no use in simply sharing the worries. There is no use in trying to find new worries in everything that happens in life. Now, man has been given a faculty that is probably unique in the world of nature. He has memory, a magnificent equipment that enables him to build his own solutions by remembrances of his own life. He has been given the equipment to estimate values, weigh all things, and cling to that which is good. In order to do these things, he must shift his point of security. He thinks if his worries are taken from him, he'll be happy. So he has some of them taken from him, and now he's worrying because he hasn't got the worries. That's frightening him. He thinks he must be failing in some way if he doesn't realize the seriousness of the situation. Now, one thing we have to learn to do, and that is to accept the complication as it is. The only way we can face this complex is to gradually work out in ourselves an explanation of it, a reason for it. Until we get down to facts and realize what is necessary, there will be no answer. And when we get to the point where we appreciate the answer, we realize that all the misery we've had was well worthwhile. That it was the only way that nature could educate a wayward creation. That it's the only way that nature can bring back to the prodigal children that it fashioned into realization of its wisdom and its love, is to allow these children to get into problems they cannot endure any longer, and to discover for once and for all that they cannot solve problems that are greater than themselves. Not an acceptance of the way things are, no, but an acceptance of the necessity that mankind must pass through certain experiences to outgrow his own ignorance. He does not have to have these negative thoughts. What he has to do, instead of giving up in despair, is accepting the challenge of personal change. He must make certain adjustments in himself. He must gradually release his energies from despair and despondency and focus them upon the understanding of life, the understanding of the way things must be and the way they should be, and the way they will be, regardless of what man does. If we can get to understand, therefore, that we are being disciplined, that the individual is being encouraged to correct his own mistakes and stop making other similar mistakes, the individual should begin to try to observe the working of universal law in the various occurrences of his life. He must begin to see reasons for things which he now regards as merely miseries. He must begin to realize that he lives in a world of lawful procedures and that he must abide by them. If we take in the wrong thoughts, we're going to be just as bad off mentally and physically as we would be if we eat food that is improper to our needs. The individual can be allergic to attitudes, and everyone, more or less, is allergic to negative thinking. Now, the person doesn't have to take this on. He can live in the midst of it, but he does not have to become contaminated.
Man's eternal quest is for the untroubled self, hidden in the depths of his own eternal being. To find this self is to discover the purpose of human existence. To understand this self is to know the laws of human redemption, and to live in harmony with this self is to enjoy a serene existence. As the surface of the sea is troubled by the winds, so the thoughts and emotions of men are troubled by the storms of circumstance. But the deeper parts of the sea are not troubled by the tempest, and in each of us is a region of peace, where self abides forever in blessedness. There is no adequate way of defining Zen. The word itself means abstract meditation. It is a realization based upon inner experience alone, and is not dependent upon spoken or written instruction. It is concerned totally with the inner life of the individual, and leads to enlightenment through the understanding of one's own nature. Because Zen is not based upon the authority of a teacher or a teaching, it must result from discoveries which thoughtful persons make when they become weary of misfortune. Our discovery of the practical values of Zen unfolds according to a pattern of 10 steps. The first step is the experience of the pressing need for greater understanding than we now possess. The second step is the experience that it is possible for us to attain to any degree of insight necessary for our own internal security. The third step is the experience that inner peace can be attained only through the proper control of our thoughts and emotions. The fourth step is the experience that there can be no advancement of character without self-discipline. The fifth step is the experience that by self-discipline, the mental, emotional, and physical life can be brought under the control of enlightened purpose. The sixth step is the experience that control over thought and emotion can be attained without stress or tension of any kind. The seventh step is the experience that proper control makes possible the condition of complete inner quietude by gradually reducing the power of external factors to disturb the inner life. The eighth step is the experience that through quietude it is possible to become receptive to all the beauty and wisdom in the universe. The ninth step is the experience that we exist eternally in space, and that true happiness and peace of soul result from complete acceptance of the universal plan and its laws. The 10th step is the experience that pure consciousness, beyond and superior to self-will and self-purpose, leads to at-one-ment with nameless reality. Zen begins to have special meaning for us when we begin to realize that nature has bestowed upon each of us every internal resource necessary to a serene existence. When we release ourselves from the tyranny of our own thoughts and emotions, we will discover true happiness. The gruff old Zen masters had very little patience with foolish persons. They pointed out that we all have the power of choice. When we choose to live badly, we also choose to suffer. The foolish gardener is miserable because of the weeds in his garden, which bear witness only to his own neglect. The wise gardener keeps his garden free from weeds and has no cause for discontent. the story of back to nature, is identical with the concept of back to self. That somewhere, some way, each individual must experience his existence in a true world. A world not fashioned by his own imagery, but a world which has a closeness to the earth, a world of values that are direct, natural, simple, and inevitable. If we cannot, therefore, go to this world from our own abodes, then we must bring this world to ourselves. We must discover it by a code of conduct or a series of internal revelations, so that if nature around us is denied us, nature can still live within us and become the basis of a normalcy and a vitality which can carry us over the doubts and problems of the years. It is learned that man can and does become keenly aware of a universal interior existence. The quietude of the forest, the gentleness of solitary places, these moods and qualities are within us, and back to nature and back to self become increasingly important as directives and as goals while we observe the results of our artificial ways and our false allegiances. The average person must first unload. He is filled to the brim with psychic acidities. He is therefore internally sick. He is sick because when he attempts to find the natural solitudes of his own life, he comes face to face with chaos. There is something very wrong with a way of life that makes for such pressure within the individual. It is making us enemies for no reason. It also, most of all, detracts from our right to know ourselves. For when we turn in upon our own natures, what we find is not ourselves. It is the accumulation of other persons in us. It is the accumulation of ages of history. It is the outside pressing in upon us until it has deformed every internal part of our own natures. By degrees we lose any close contact with realities, with vitalities, by which our lives might be more correctly and properly directed. Nature does not require the way of life that we are building. The squirrel still stores its food for the winter. Grasses grow and trees come forth with their wonderful herbage in the spring. Nature does not demand great cities or great enterprises. Nature lives its own continuance in a simple and direct way. Man, of course, does not wish to return to the estate of a woodchuck or something of that nature. If, consequently, our thousands of years of civilization have brought us no more security than that which is enjoyed by the woodchuck, we have not traveled far. What we call our way of life has become an hypnotic conviction in ourselves, something to be defended whether it is right or not, something that must be endured because it is. And against this fatality we have no recourse. Our spirit of rebellion ceases, and we adjust ourselves to these inevitables. It is far more important for the individual to achieve a kind of victory over confusion. Pleasures around man bring no pleasure to man unless that man himself is pleasant. Our life should have within it the pleasantries of nature, a gradual recognition that we are not here to defeat nature, but to fulfill her, that we are here not to be masters over life, but friends of life, and that our greatest victory is when we help others to succeed. Anyone can point out that nature is eternally encroaching upon man, that man must fight nature in order to survive,
If he wishes to survive against nature, he must fight her to the end, and she will win. But if he wishes to survive with nature, he may unite his resources with her own and come to a splendid victory. Something has to be awry. It was not intended to be this way. It was not intended that we should suffer through these years in constant servitude to antagonisms and strife, binding our private lives with sorrow and conflict. In nature around us, we observe constantly the strength of the individual. The individual does not know that it is strong. It is strong by an instinct stronger than life itself. Out in the forest, the mother animal bears her young, alone. There is no physician, there is no society to protect her, there is no one concerned about her. Yet in her own quiet and complete way, she performs the mystery for which she was created. And she continues to care for her young in a wilderness. And yet in this wilderness, she finds little cause of unusual anxiety. She expects danger. She is prepared for it. And yet she faces it herself. It is not possible for her to call the police or ask for help or to depend upon a strong society to protect her. Yet alone in her own way of life, she has for countless millions of years preserved the life type of her kind and has gone on and on without cities, without great institutions, simply because of a strange instinct, an instinct which is more important because it is vested in the security and inevitability of internal resource. We cannot go back to her way of life in everything, but we can sense that we live in the weakness of perpetual dependence, that we have learned not even to think for ourselves. We cannot plan our own daily menu. We cannot do the common chores of life. Everywhere we must be helped. We must be assisted. We must be supported and carried. When we have found security in ourselves, we do not rush to others to supplement our weakness. We go to them rather to share our strength. We have forgotten the miracles of nature and have become hypnotized by the pseudo-miracles of our own achievements. If our ways were right, they would lead to solution. Ours are not. They lead nowhere, and we are drifting with a tide of adversities closing in upon us. We should discover that as truly as we can look out upon a great plain with its forests and trees and rivers, so we can look in to a boundless natural universe. That there is no tree or shrub outside of us which does not have some symbolic equivalent in our own internal universe. The nature around us and the nature within us form together a common communion. And when the within and the without are in harmony, man is well. When the nature in him and the nature around him have formed a powerful camaraderie of purpose, that individual is in harmony. Until he is concerned with his own largeness, he must fall over his own smallness. He must discover, and he must discover by coming into the presence of something bigger than himself. He cannot discover by being placed in the midst of a man-made world that is falling apart. He must discover by being brought back into the realization that man-made things are but incidents in a God-made plan. Nature does not divide creeds or sects or races or classes or clans. Nature serves all its creatures and provides each of them with certain instincts and equipments suitable for the best expectancy of their survival. As each creature fulfills its purpose, it binds that purpose to the common good. If any creature, therefore, fails to fulfill its own purpose, it retards nature and detracts from the common success which nature has planned and intended. A world of challenge, a world of insight, may gradually relax his false worship of his own achievements and come back again to the recognition of a simple partnership with life itself. In nature, we become instinctively aware that certain resources of faculty and perception and reflection are stimulated in us that are not otherwise called into activity. Man is never healthy. Man is never able to go on and carry the burden of this life with dignity and success. He is never wise, he is never good, he is never sufficient until he can approach his own inner life without fear. He must be able to enter into the inner part of his own consciousness and find there the natural motions of nature. Our association with nature is for one purpose only, namely the purpose of providing us with the means to transcend the physical aspects of life. That all things, actually and factually, exist for the purpose of making man's inner life beautiful. Until these things are the complete things for which we strive, we shall not achieve the security we seek. And each individual must free himself from the slavery of the world he has fashioned. And to do it, he must return to the real world, the world that he did not fashion, the world he has lost and forgotten because he was so busy with his own inventions.
Now, white magic in its essential form must be virtuous. White magic is that which serves without hurting. It is that which accomplishes good and is never used for any other purpose. White magic is the use of the powers of life, the powers of nature, and even the ordinary faculties of the mind for the perpetuation of constructive imagery. It is necessary, therefore, that all white magic, in order to retain its nature, must be backed by a strong moral character. These people, to remain white magicians, would under no condition pervert, corrupt, or compromise the principles which they hold sacred. So white magic is the use of every power that we know for the service of good. It is the ability to learn but never abuse what is learned. And it is that the highest of all learning is that which is dedicated to unselfish purposes. White magic is not used to help oneself. The individual who serves gradually gains the realization that a divine power in himself is making this service possible. And it is this divine power which then becomes the leader of his life. Now, in white magic, therefore, the individual must realize that the principal energy upon which he depends is not his own. The energy is within himself. It is a soul power. And any use that he makes of this divine energy must be worthy of its source, the light of God and the light of truth. Therefore, the individual who uses the divine power is forbidden by the law itself to use it for himself, but by using it for others, he reaps a virtue within himself. If the motive is personal, the achievement is much lower and much less permanent. We have to use the divine powers that are given to us to serve the divine needs of our fellow men. We must use them as they were intended to be used, not to make life more comfortable for ourselves, but to make life more important for those in great need. We have today a world in great need. Therefore, it becomes particularly unfortunate in these days to use the needs, sorrows, miseries, and sufferings of other people as the basis of improving our own economic condition. White magic is also the development of the love principle. It is to understand the real deep relationship between the human being and his Creator. Love is one of the great magical powers because it transforms the individual in whom it is real. Always love is unselfish. And as far as it is unselfish, it is white magic. If it becomes selfish, it turns gray, and if it is selfish enough, it will turn black. So we have now the basis of white magic: service, sacrifice, and dedication. We have the individual using the mysterious resources of the universe to make life happier and safer for those who live with us and for those who come after us. This means that their true white magic has to be the result of a considerable internal insight. He is to be better not for his own sake alone, but for the world in which he lives. Black magic is another factor we've had with us from the time of the Greeks, Romans, Persians, and Hindus. Black magic has always been a source of fear, a source of dread. It has controlled people by terrorizing them. It has controlled individuals by threatening them with psychic forces or for psychic disasters. It is the individual held from the freedom of his own life by fear, by anxiety. And in the black magic societies, it was assumed that there was an infernal equivalent to the divine hierarchy. As there was a god, though there was a devil. As this god was served by all kinds of angels and archangels and thrones and dominations and powers, so the infernal god was served by all forms of evil beings. These evil spirits became a hierarchy, and many famous people are believed to have signed pacts with fallen angels to have all the powers of the world for a certain length of time, and then lose their own souls. And the pact ended on a certain day, and so did he. Now, black magic is dedicated to the concept of power without retribution. It is based upon the idea that it is possible for the human being to conceive and design and invent all kinds of mysterious things for unworthy purposes. It is possible for him to gather wealth by unfair action. And always with these things were little scribbles, little lines of mysterious characters in Greek or Hebrew or Senzar or Phoenician or something that nobody could read. Now this kind of brings something to mind that we don't think of very much. What are the great magical alphabets of today? Mathematics. All those formulas on the blackboards, on the institutes of technology, a mysterious abracadabra understood only by those who have been students of the subject. But out of these strange combinations of figures, numbers, various variations, come all kinds of strange things. From the studies of physics and biology and chemistry, there has developed a tremendous number of very strange and not necessarily very wonderful things. Remember now that the motive is the purpose, is the principal factor. Where a thing is done to help mankind, it is right. Where it is done to profit only individuals, or is made to damage some at the expense of others, it is black magic, regardless of whether it is on the level of banking or on the level of agriculture. Motive lies behind everything. If the motive is not basically good, then the individual gets into trouble. Many years ago, I was talking by a physicist from the University of Berkeley on their researches in nuclear weaponry. And I asked him how he slept at night as being part of this program. And he said very simply, he said, well, we don't have no responsibility. We invent, we don't use. If we invent it and somebody else abuses it, it's their fault, not ours. If they want to use it for war instead of for peace, we can't help it. The possibility of preventing it in the first place never occurred to him. But years ago, several prominent physicists retired rather than to go on into the type of armament that is based upon those funny little figures that look almost exactly like some of the magical characters in the black magical books of the Middle Ages. We have the ability to invent, and we think of progress in terms of invention. We are so proud of landing somebody on the moon that we can hardly wait to get them on to Mercury. We are so proud of the television that we never give a thought as to what comes over it. We are very proud of the nuclear fission and all that has to do with it. Now we're gaining an inordinate pride over all these computers that we are using for one purpose or another. Nobody, however, gives any thought to the misuse of these things. Once they are invented, you can't take it back. The Egyptians and the Greeks had a lot of knowledge of these subjects, but they gave this knowledge only to initiated members of their esoteric bodies, and they held those initiates under the strongest obligation. One single slip of the tongue could cost the initiate his life if he was dedicated to the service of the temple. So black magic is the abuse of knowledge, the abuse of the energies of life, the perversion of the principles of science, medicine, law, or religion. Black magic is the use of those values which are divinely available to us for purposes contrary to the will of God and the need of humanity. And where this happens, there's going to be trouble. There's going to be trouble because you can't break rules without hurting yourself in the long run. So here we now have a world which is largely dominated by the abuse of privilege, energy, and opportunity. We have a world made up of people who do not care what the consequences are. The only thing they want to do is to make an unreasonable profit over what they discover. But they're laboring in a universe which is not very kindly to those types of attitudes. Somewhere the disaster happens. We cannot abuse privileges without ultimately suffering physically, morally, mentally, spiritually, and also bringing down our own civilizations in ruin. So the black magicians now probably are mostly in the fields of higher learning. But these great black magicians, these great economic speculators, these tremendous perverters of knowledge, these are the things that worry us.